In this remarkable world we live, we stand amazed at the grandeur of creation. We open our eyes and are amazed. We find creative design, but we also find chaos. How do these things coexist? Is one perceived and the other real? If so, what is true? For what are we all yearning? Hello and welcome to What is True. My name is Dennis Caro, host of this program for 25 years, and has been an incredible privilege to study God's Word with you. There is a YouTube channel now in which that you can go and you can search, research, and re-watch so many of the topics that we've discussed here on the TV program, or if you're studying with someone, a great resource. What is True on the YouTube channel, What is True with Dennis Carroll, What is True with Don, What is True with Don Patton, Don McLean, Bruce Reeves. You type it in, it'll pop up, What is True with, and one of these guys will show up. And we're inviting you, I invite you to watch the TV program, but today is different. Got a big announcement about inviting church, inviting you to join us for worship. We are the church. We assemble, we come together as the church, 1 Corinthians 11 and verse 18. And the Little Rock Church of Christ that has supported me and this program in much of its entirety, many others have helped in some way, in many ways. Just amazing how we've been here and maintained our presence here. But the Little Rock Church of Christ, 9 years ago, when it was just a thing, we tried to avoid it, it didn't get avoided, and we ended up at Guillermo's Coffee on a Sunday morning where I was looking for myself and my wife and my daughter to show up. The man that's going to preach here in a minute, his son and daughter-in-law came by my house. They have been in the military. They handed me a donation. That is, they realized what had happened. And with their money, I was able to buy the utensils for the Lord's Supper. We were going to come together as a church. Came together at the very beginning from a young couple just in their journey, adopting children. It's just, a beautiful picture of compassion and how we participate. Well, we get to the coffee shop the first morning. I don't know what to expect, and there's my wife and my daughter, and that's where I thought we were going to be. But the end result had been the previous week, what was going to be 15 ended up being 30. And my granddaughter comes in, she goes, "Papa, you try to make it look like a church, but it's still a coffee shop." So the building had something to do with it, but then again, it had nothing to do with it, because we went from that to 35, and then we went to 80, and we're at the front door. The class, their little meeting rooms are full of kids trying to study. We're at the very front by the cashier with another class trying to formulate. And so we actually closed Guillermo's Coffee. Here's a plug for them. They shut down until 11:30 due to worship service. I remember a man walking in on a Sunday morning to get a cup of coffee and sitting down to the side in the corner over there, and I remember him singing hymns with us as he waited to get his coffee. Amazing. And then across the street, we found the Breckenridge Village in this empty building. And it was rough. I mean, it was rough on the inside. This is what we were going to meet in the very first day. And my son walks through the side door because we were using just the annex to the front. He said, "Look, we got a problem. We don't have room for everyone to sit. So everyone has to pick up your chair and walk to the front." And that's what it looked like. We walked into this area where we were trying to construct a place to gather, and it was controlled chaos. It ended up being one of the most emotional services because, well, there were so many elements that were abnormal that forced us to, number one, focus on each other and getting each other into place. And then We had to use just the side light. We had no electricity or no overhead lighting in that room. But it was the first time that we were coming together and starting to pull things together. And through the course of the 9 years, it just, as everybody else, these little ones are grown. The 9 years later, a lot of them are graduating. It's just amazing the course that happens, but that day, connections and reconnections with some relationships that are for eternity were there. And some of those people, I mean, in that course of time and in the course of the last few years, it's been very difficult. But man, these men, we put it together. What were we going to do with, we didn't have enough room. Here's the ladies, they jump in, and everybody builds. Everybody's doing a part, whatever it is, to bring about a place to sit down. But what are we there for? We're there to worship God. And we still had a problem because it was crowded. And we were still in just half of the little building we were in. Young men beginning to teach classes, the participation beautiful. Nobody left out, no matter what, whether disability or otherwise. We were able to have in that march Don Patton, who now is with us. He came in and did a lectureship as we began to start to build the local work, and he's still with us. And that year, really for two, we began to talk about compassion. In the midst of pain and disappointment, we were reaching for preserving compassion and avoiding bitterness or anger or wrath or clamor or evil speaking. Moving forward to true restoration, and this is the first lesson, was the restoration. He restores my soul. And I'm here to tell you 9 years later, the message is the same. There's my daughter holding a young man that has a disability. He's hard to hold now, but it is a picture of two innocent ones caring for each other. And that's the message. I'm inviting you to church to be a part of this healing group that looks to the lives of each other and reaches in and not just shaking a hand, but to meet the need. This young lady was confessing Christ, and we baptized her into Christ that night. And there we had the church. That sign is about to come down. They're going to remodel Breckenridge, and that sign's coming down, and I'm inviting you to, look at this beautiful facility. This was the Unity Building, right off of Reservoir Road. We were at a point where we were going to just have to meet in a meeting room or figure something out, not knowing what to do. And about June or July, I made that announcement that we'd found a place to meet in a room, and one of the men, as he was driving that day, saw that this building was available. And for about 1/4 of what it would cost us to go build a new building, we were able to obtain this building. October the 20th, today, Little Rock Church of Christ, 9:30 a.m. We're going to begin with a song and prayer service at 9:30, and then we will go into worship at throughout the morning. At 10:30, we'll begin the Lord's Supper. Beautiful facility that has been provided is all I can say. It's I'm standing here amazed at God's provisions and time and chance, certainly, but just at the right time throughout these years of uncertainty. And nobody has certainty. But I'm inviting you to church. I'm inviting you to know what the church is. The man that's going to preach next week, he spent a whole week or 3 weeks about the nature of the church. And it gets technical when we try to break it down into the various acts, the things that we do, and we're trying to define that maybe to somebody that doesn't know so they could understand. But when someone comes in and someone connects to them, then they begin to understand, and the very essence of the invitation, the Spirit that is through God, His Word, He's inviting you. Hebrews 10 tells us, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together as is the manner of some, but exhort one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. And then you get to the end of the Bible, and it's the Spirit and the bride, that is, the bride is the church, and they are proclaiming, come, take of the water of life freely, and this is my invitation to you and to everybody in the sound of my voice that is anywhere near Central Arkansas. Trust, honesty, self-control. These are the things that every one of us try to bring in our heart, in our lives when we come together. It reads this way in the Bible: faith, hope, love. Follow that again: trust, honesty, and self-control. Faith, hope, and love. And somebody goes, how did self-control and love come to be the same thing? It's because we will see that love is it's just a choice, a decision you make this morning that you react upon that brings you together with others. 3 principles to bring us together. Sacrificial, number 1, you got to get up. You got to go to the trouble of getting yourself together, which could also include, given your age and the number of kids you have or the problems of the day, suffering. And we elevate suffering sometimes when we maybe ought not. And then nurturing, and that's what we're coming together for. Teach and admonish, to encourage. If somebody is weak or struggling, we go to them. So where's the problem? Why is this lesson so critical, but why does it become so increasingly difficult? And in James chapter 3, beginning in verse 14, verse 13, who among you is wise and has understanding? Let him show by good behavior his deeds are done in the gentleness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, don't be arrogant and so lie against the truth. Now look, I think that's the attitude many bring up before church. I'm not coming to church, a bunch of hypocrites there. Well, don't be jealous or selfish ambition. Because somebody else is weak and got a problem means you ought to be there. Because your obligation is to bring us all together. The wisdom that comes from above is pure, peaceable, gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without hypocrisy. At the heart of every failed relationship is the element of selfishness. Where do they come from? Where did the problems come from? What happened 9 years ago? Well, it may have been me, may have been a group of us, but selfishly, it didn't keep us together. One cure for our selfishness is the sacrifice of self. And my petition to you is to come to an understanding of the church, and in this invitation that you respond by coming to the church. No, I mean coming to the group, identifying with the body of believers. And that may include various locations. I'm in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I'm speaking to a group in this region, and I'm inviting you to go to the trouble of coming and seeing what it's about. In Ephesians 5, when he talks about the marriage being like the church, wives, subject yourselves to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband's the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, Savior of the body. So, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. He gave of himself. Understanding sacrifice. We live in a culture that looks at church, that drives by and looks at the various amenities that it has to offer. And the last one we're thinking of is, what could I sacrifice to help this local group reach those who are in need? So when we go in and seek to be served, well, if you're weak, struggling, then indeed you come in humility, because you will be lifted up. But I want you to know that understanding sacrifice is time. Time. Write it down. It's Sunday morning. If you're watching this on the first time, if you're watching it on YouTube, just stand aside. Life is time. It's our greatest asset. And what we are talking about is the sacrifice of time. And what I see in our culture today, canceling evening services so we can have more time. And you know what that's turned into? You know what it was. It wasn't anything different, because a man had to get up in the middle of a football game and go to night services. And so it sure did make sense. I could have more family time if we canceled services. And not that many people come. Well, why don't they come? Maybe we're not giving what we ought, or maybe we don't want to make that sacrifice. Maybe we've discovered that we can do something better with our time. But whoever desires to be great shall be your servant. Mark chapter 10. Throughout that entire text there's a big argument about who's going to be the greatest. You want to be in the kingdom. Well, I'll use an example with Bruce and Don. As I was gone, they have their work, they have the things that they do. They also do the work of an evangelist. I was going to be gone. We have no money. We're not in this for money. We don't have money. And so these men devoted all of everything that it took. They sacrificed to preach the gospel, even though they're supported in their local work. And what I'm saying is that to be in the kingdom and to see yourself as anything other than a servant, you're going to be a hindrance to the work, not an encouragement. Men that do what they have done, these women that did what they did, these things are servitude. And it's often easier to see selfishness in others than in yourself. And personal testimony, selfishness in relationships leads to isolation. And we need to check ourselves about that. Because maybe we're the problem. When I was referring to Ephesians chapter 5, there in the Christ in the church, husbands ought to love their wives as their own body, for he loves his own wife, he loves himself. No one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it as Christ does the church. Nourishing and cherishing, sacrificing to make the relationship there. So we have this simple solution that is given to us, and it says, this great mystery, verse 32, but I speak concerning with reference to Christ and the church. So when he points to the church, I tried to get here today with my wife having to be gone this morning to an early doctor's appointment. I'm having to borrow Don's remote control and Bible because I couldn't get out the door with everything that I needed. We become dependent upon one another because of the love and the nature of the relationship. It became because she was sacrificial in getting me out the door. I didn't realize how much sacrifice she would make until I was trying to do it on my own. And overcoming selfishness, get the last one, because I think it's one maybe I struggle with more, and I know that some of the folks in here do. All of you be submissive. I mean, sometimes we give in to what someone else wants, not compromising truth, but we have discussions about things and the way that they'll be done or what will be done, and we are open. We're not dogmatic. Suffering love. It's kind of a neat thought, but I mean, that's exactly what 1 Corinthians 13:4 says. And love suffers long. Not only that, but and I don't have a lot of time because I give you the intro and I want to give you a good outro as well. Love suffers long. Not only is it suffering, but its response to suffering is nurturing. Love is kind. Now, kind in Vincent Word Study says it's gentle in behavior. That's about as good as it can be said. It's gentle. It's not harmful, doesn't hurt, it's not abrasive. Sacrifice, suffering, nurturing will help us control our communication. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of building one up, to edify. So that's where we draw the line in what we say and the way we say it. Our communication skills, be angry and do not sin. Ephesians chapter 4. We reading from the book of Ephesians a moment ago in that relationship. Well, this is the directive on how to govern relationships, and that is be angry, do not sin. Don't even let the sun go down on your wrath. You even have a timetable so it'll be settled in your mind so you don't carry it out in tomorrow. So, could it be that my attitude is the problem and the answer? You remember the song, Communication is the Problem and the Answer. Well, your attitude will reflect your communication. And does optimism define your attitude? You know, I know that many of you are very familiar with the text, but I wonder if you've ever just really thought about if I was going to have a talk and I wanted bullet points to provide motivation for people to stay positive. Listen, love is patient, love is kind, love is not jealous, love does not brag, is not arrogant, does not act unbecomingly, it does not seek its own, is not provoked, does not take into account a wrong suffered. It doesn't keep score. Does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices in truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails, never ceases, never stops, never quits, and it always works. 9 years of beginning with a lesson on compassion and preaching the whole year just on maintaining and holding the compassion that Christ has for us. Bringing joy and optimism to the life of others, bringing joy and optimism into a circumstance where it was going to be extremely difficult to establish and set up and to maintain. So with a few minutes, 7 principles that keep us together. And that is rather simple, but listen more and speak less. James 1:19. Be angry and do not sin. It's not wrong to be angry. Just don't let it go too far. Learn to communicate. Be forgiving, merciful. These are the children of God. Know when to keep silent. Oftentimes, even when we think we have it perceived as an answer, it's best to wait. so that we make certain that the person that's listening can receive the information, preparing the soul. And then having the proper motive. This is the thing that carries us the furthest. Because if our motive is right, then tomorrow, I haven't changed whether 20 people respond to the TV program or no one responds. My motive is from my heart to preach, to teach, and to help. Another thing that I think is laughter is like medicine. And you know, there's some people at our congregation that are good at laughing. And you know what? When they're there, it just makes the place better. And so, bring in your good humor. Bring in a good attitude. And Ecclesiastes 7 in verse 21, don't overanalyze. Don't listen to what everybody has to say about everything. You know yourself that you've said things that you ought not to say, and don't get all wrapped up in those things. Ecclesiastes 7:21. 7 principles that keep us there. Pray together. As you saw in those pictures, we must learn, and that picture of a husband and wife in 1 Peter 3:7 applying again to us. If there's a spirit of strife, of unkind looks and unkind words, a disposition that easily takes offense, unwillingness to forgive, they prevent a return of prayers. And what is our prayer? Same as the prayer of Jesus, that we would all be one. As you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they all may be one in us, that the world might believe that you sent me. And that's what we're praying today. Will you come and pray that prayer with us and be an answer to that prayer? Searching for real solutions, personal relationship with God, sacrifice, suffering, nurturing, understanding, and having a patient disposition. These are the things. We acknowledge our differences, we confess our faults, we seek spiritual restoration, we unite our heart, and we meet at the Word of God. Don't reflect on past bitterness and all those things. The invitation, faith, hope, love. Reliance, confidence, optimism, choice. Searching for that which God has provided. Restored relationships. Restored to that which brings us ultimately the decision that we make will bring us together. Joy in the Lord. May we so find it today. October 20th, call us, 501-519-7778. Have a blessed day.
I lift my eyes unto the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Praise you in this storm, and I will lift my hands. You are who you are, no matter where I am, and every tear I've cried, you hold in your hand. You never left my side, and though